So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar on the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot. My name is Grace, and I am the Marine Policy and Advocacy Officer here at the Irish Wildlife Trust. For those of you who don't know much about the Irish Wildlife Trust, we are a non-governmental organisation and we raise awareness on the importance of nature and work to campaign for the protection of biodiversity. So if you want to support the Irish Wildlife Trust and the work that we do, you can go to our website, which is www.iwt.ie, and become a member. We are a charitable organisation, so your membership fee helps support our campaigns, and you will also get our quarterly print magazine, which you can see here. Oh, a wee bit blurry. Our quarterly print magazine, which is full of interesting articles and up-to-date news on what's going on with nature and biodiversity in Ireland. There are also some member-only events which are run, which you'd also be able to take part in. So this webinar is being recorded. All of our past webinars are available on our YouTube channel, so you can go over there and you can check out the wide range of topics which we cover. Because this webinar is being recorded, if you know anyone that wanted to tune in tonight but wasn't able to, you can let them know, and in a couple of days we'll have it uploaded onto the channel. So a little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. So the webinar will last around 1 hour or so, might go over a little bit, and we're going to hear first from Jack at Fair Sea. The Irish Wildlife Trust is one of Fair Sea's partners. And then we're going to be chatting to Professor Dan Laffoley, who is chairperson of the Hope Spot Council at Mission Blue. And then we will be hearing from Lucy Hunt, who is the founder of SeaSynergy in Kerry and one of the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot champions. So if you have any questions for any of our speakers, please put your questions into the Q&A box, which I'll be keeping an eye on, and we'll have time for these at the end. So before we go to Jack, I'm going to play a short video which has Dr. Sylvia Earle in it, which highlights some of the reasons that the Greater Skellig Coast became Ireland's first ever hope spot and why this is so important. So I'll just share my screen here.
I want to welcome the Greater Skellig Coast of Ireland as a hope spot with champions Aoife O'Mahony with the Fair Seas team and Lucy Hunt with SeaSynergy. This hope spot is being announced at a crucial time in Ireland because in 2023, new National Marine Protected Area legislation will be introduced for the first time. 81% of Irish people believe that we need to protect, conserve, and restore the ocean. This legislation will help achieve this very desirable protection. The new hope spot covers the area surrounding Tralee and Dingle Bays, key breeding areas for several threatened species of sharks, rays, and skates. The waters off North Kerry are internationally important because they're home for some of the last remaining refuges of angel sharks and white skates. This hope spot has one of the highest levels of basking sharks known in Ireland. There are many iconic islands in this hope spot. Thousands of puffins come to Skellig Michael and Puffin Island. Over 26% of Ireland's breeding population of puffins inhabit the islands in this area. Puffins, Arctic terns, sandwich terns, northern gannets, and European storm petrels are other beautiful seabirds. This hope spot is also a hotspot for cetaceans, with bottlenose dolphins, harbor porpoises, humpback fin, and minke whales calling this place home. We salute you, Ireland, and you, the Irish people, for your commitment to reach the goal of 30% of protection for the ocean by 2030.
So that was our Hope Spot video there, which is really fantastic video. Shows some stunning images from the Greater Skellig Coast, and it gives us a little taste of what we're going to be talking about a little bit more in depth later on. So we'll go now to Jack from Fair Seas and hear a bit more about Fair Seas' work.
Thanks so much, Grace. And really, really looking forward to hearing from Dan and Lucy in a little while. So I'll keep this as short as I can. I just have a few slides here to share a bit of information about what Fair Seas is and where the information to support the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot came from. So let me just see here. I'll share this presentation if you can all see that. If Grace, maybe you can give me a thumbs up. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so let's close this here. So Fair Seas, let me take a look at the time here so I'm not jabbering or going on for too long. So Fair Seas is a coalition of Ireland's leading environmental NGOs. So we have 7 ENGO and network partners, and we've all come together under the one name to try and campaign for more marine protected areas in Ireland. So we want to see a strong, cohesive network of marine protected areas covering at least 30% of Irish waters by 2030. And we want to see a minimum of 10% of these areas fully or highly protected. Our partners here, sorry, now that's not going on. Oh yeah. So you can see our partners here, the Irish Wildlife Trust, who are hosting tonight's event, as well as our other partners, and our funders down below here at the bottom. And it's really amazing working in a coalition like this. And this is the first time Ireland's large ENGOs and networks have come together to work on a marine campaign like this. So it's really, really fantastic. And I think it's really showing the ambition of people right across Ireland that we really want healthy seas, and we want to ensure that our government give us the legislation to allow us to create these new marine protected areas. And as well as campaigning for marine protected areas, we want to try to foster a kind of a sense of ocean stewardship in Ireland, because the ocean obviously affects all of us, from the coasts right into the inland, the interior parts of Ireland. So it's, as an island nation, it's so important that we foster that sense of, I suppose, care and responsibility for the ocean, that we all can play our part. So Fair Seas began just over 1 year ago. So we launched in February 2022. And this is essentially a brief introduction to why we started. You can see here that in 2022, Ireland's marine protected area coverage stood at only 2.1%, and pretty much none of that had any management or monitoring or funding in place. So not a great place to be when the government's own targets said we were going to hit 10% by 2020. So that's 2 years late, and we were still only at 2%. So it's within the Irish programme for government to create marine protected areas, but not much had actually been happening to make that happen in reality. So what we're campaigning for is to see this. So you can see the difference here. These hashetted areas here and the darker brown areas. The darker areas are the existing SAC network. So that's our special areas of conservation designated through EU law. And the areas we've superimposed are the areas we have identified as good potentials for marine protected areas in Irish waters. And just a bit of info on SACs versus MPAs. So special areas of conservation are a European nature conservation management tool, and it's the EU Habitats Directive that determines the species that can be protected using them. And it's just what we are campaigning for is national legislation, because currently there is no definition of a marine protected area in Irish law. So if we can get national legislation that defines what that is, that means that we can set ourselves up to really properly manage and monitor and budget for these areas. So by having our national marine protected areas legislation, it will give us greater powers to manage and monitor all of this new network of marine protected areas. So where did the information that led to the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot come from? Well, in June 2022, Fair Seas published a report called Revitalising Our Seas. And for anyone who wants, you can scan this QR code here. It's going to be on the next couple of slides, and that'll open up a PDF of the report on your phone. The report, what it did is it looked at 5 different biological groupings, including the cetaceans, so the whales, dolphins, and porpoises, the elasmobranchs, so the sharks, skates, rays, and chimeras, It looked at benthic bottom types. It looked at commercially exploited species and at seabirds. So we looked at those 5 different groupings. And what we did is we did an assessment of basically, in simple terms, the levels of biodiversity for all. Basically, we took all of the available data to us for biodiversity in those groupings in Irish seas. And we looked at how many different species and how many of those individual species existed in particular areas. So we did all of this different sort of mapping that you can see here on this next page, or sorry, it's 2 pages away. So we did various types of analysis and mapping, and we basically overlaid a lot of data looking for hotspots of marine biodiversity in Irish waters. And you can see here that we have within the report case studies. And all of this analysis led to us identifying 16 areas of interest for marine protected area designation. So places we think would be a good place to start looking for this new network of marine protected areas. And so here you can see these are just 3 of the areas as examples. So Loophead to Kenmare, which I'll focus on a little bit more in this next slide, is the area that is now also the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot. So here you can just see a little bit of the information that went into it. So these various different maps here pertain to different kinds of analysis that were done. So let's see the map in the center here, dead in the middle, is these are breeding sites for many of our seabirds. So you have in this area Manx shearwaters, you have northern gannets, and you have puffins, and you can see all the extremely important sites all around this area, which is now the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot. And see the 26% of puffins here down off Ballinskelligs on the Skellig Islands here, and many more very important sites all the way up to Loophead in County Clare here at the Bridges of Ross, which is an extremely important site and a bottleneck for migrating birds as well as nesting seabirds. And like Sylvie Earle mentioned in the video, it's also an extremely important area for basking sharks. And Tralee and Dingle Bay, and Tralee Bay in particular, maybe one of Ireland's last remaining refuge sites for the angel shark, which is critically endangered globally. And we've met with anglers and fishermen in Tralee Bay who remember angel sharks in huge numbers over the years and have witnessed the absolute, decimation of them. And there is a lot of hope there among the local community that marine protected areas could help. And when we went and we've talked with fishermen down there, they're very interested. They are genuinely interested in conversation, but it just has to be done in a meaningful way where everyone's voice is given a chance to be heard. And so here's a bit of inspiration for some of the amazing species that we're looking at in our Hope Spot, an amazing species that Fair Seas Research has looked at. And these are just literally a couple of photos now to remind us all of how amazing marine biodiversity is in Ireland, because it's colder, it can be a little darker sometimes. We're often used to seeing pictures of tropical waters. So here are just some of the species in our waters. Here are basking sharks photographed by George Carbis off the west coast of Clare. Amazing species that aggregate in large numbers every summer to feed. Down to our small hermit crabs with anemones that live on their backs. Like, what an incredible symbiosis going on here. You can see the anemone covering the shell of the hermit crab and the tentacles coming out below. So beautiful small things that we often mightn't see when we're out snorkeling. To our puffins, we have then deep sea coral reefs. So these are images. This is an image from the Marine Institute's Sea Rover program, which are photographing some of the deepest parts of the ocean in Ireland. And so I said we identified 16 areas of interest for marine protected area designation. 8 of those are coastal and 8 are offshore sites. And many of the ones along the shelf edge are extremely important for deep water corals like these, and like these other amazing species that are existing. And the Sea Rover project has access to a lot of those photos, and we're working with them to make sure that we can show you as many of them as possible over the next couple of months on social media. And then we have nudibranchs, of course, and these were photographed by Libby Keatley, who is a diver and based in the north of Ireland. And only last week did she hear, amazingly, that a species of nudibranch that she had spotted in Skerries off the coast of Dublin, a nudibranch she had spotted there was actually a new species that had never been described by science before. And a paper was only just published, I think last week, with the first official description of the species. So to think that is how much is still out there to be understood in our waters. This was a shore dive from someone who's diving all the time, And they just noticed something a little bit different. And they found out, sorry, this also, by the way, is not that species. I forgot to put in a photo of the new species, but this just shows you the beauty of nudibranchs and different things that can live in our waters. But to think that, you know, right on our doorstep, there's new species still to be discovered is, I think, incredible, and just shows why these areas need to be protected before we might do too much damage to things we don't even know exist yet. And here's another few examples of the amazing colorful creatures in our waters. These are more photos from Libby Keatley. She kindly donated to us. And now for the reason we're all here this evening is Dr. Sylvia Earle. These are photographs that we took while we met Dr. Earle at Impact 5 in Vancouver. This was at an event of Hope Spot champions, talking about the different amazing parts of the ocean that have been designated with Hope Spots recently. So you can see on the far right here, this is Donald Griffin, our policy officer, Dr. Earle in the middle, Aoife O'Mahony, our campaign manager, and myself here on the far right. So it was such a pleasure to be able to work on the Hope Spot process between ourselves and with Lucy from SeaSynergy and with the team at Mission Blue. And the fact that an area has been designated in Irish waters is just absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, I think in Ireland, we appreciate it so much. We know how beautiful our waters are, but perhaps because it's not as photographed as tropical waters, I think we still have a lot of work to do to engage more people with how really amazing they are. And just this is the final point I'll make here, just an update on marine protected areas in Ireland. So like I said, when we started, the process hadn't really begun for marine protected areas. Where we are today, so the general scheme of the Marine Protected Areas Bill, so this is like an outline of what this bill or the legislation will look like, was published in December 2022, so just before Christmas last year. It then underwent the pre-legislative scrutiny by the Joint Oireachtas Committee. So that was a group of government TDs who sat and held various meetings with various stakeholders and got evidence on the scheme and what it should include. And we were very thankful, along with our Wildlife Trust, to be invited to one of those meetings to give evidence on strengthening this piece of legislation. And the report from that pre-legislative scrutiny is now with the government and with drafters. And we're hoping to see a draft of the legislation, so the first draft of the actual legislation, by the end of this year. And we've been working all year long. We've held a briefing with government just last month or the month before on marine protected areas in Irish waters, how important they are, and just reinstating that this legislation needs to be as strong as possible to allow us to manage, monitor, fund, and protect our ocean properly. And so I will leave it there for now. If anyone wants more information on the legislation, we've also published a white paper. The white paper is basically our key asks for what we want to see in the legislation. And we've also published a legal handbook on marine protected areas. So that's a document that people have found very useful, explaining the various terms and terminologies that go along with the legal side of marine protected areas. And so I have a few more slides that we'll get back to later, but that is all from me for now. I'll pass it back over to Grace.
That's brilliant, Jack. Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, do feel free to pop them in the Q&A box there, and we'll get to them at the end. So now we're going to go to Dan, who is the chairperson of the Hope Spot Council at Mission Blue. And has done so much for ocean conservation in his long career. So thank you, Dan, for joining us this evening.
Absolute pleasure. Lovely to be here.
So could you tell us a wee bit about yourself and how you came to be chairperson of the Hope Spot Council at Mission Blue?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Jersey in the Channel Islands, so I'm an islander. Small island, and I was on the seashore at 10 days old in a carrycot. So I've been connected to the ocean all my life, and I've been very fortunate to have a career that's enabled me to, I guess, be in the right place at the right time, and to not have many terms of reference around me, so I can try and do the right thing and push things forward quite hard. So for quite a few years, I was head of marine conservation at English Nature. I started in Nature Conservancy Council in the UK. Then I became head of marine conservation for English Nature and Natural England. So I led the process of, first of all, putting in the first no-take zone, as we called them in those days, around Lundy. That was myself and our Devon and Cornwall team that put that in place 20 years ago now. And since then, when I was working at the agencies, I sort of scaled up and put in place the first network of marine protected areas around England. And then I was stolen from the agencies by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And for the last 17 years, I've just stepped down from that. So I'm now Emeritus Marine Vice Chair of the World Commission on Protected Areas. And in that role, I could try and do what I did in England for the world. So when you hear of protecting at least 30% of land and sea, that was me and 6 or 7 other people at the World Parks Congress in Sydney who decided we needed to do more. At that time, terrestrial was talking about 50%, and I thought probably the UN won't sign up to that level, but 30, at least 30 probably. And much water under the bridge, and the world has now signed up to at least 30%. I was also behind the formation of the Marine World Heritage Programme, High Seas Alliance to take on the UN on the High Seas Agreement, the creation of blue carbon, and then championing ocean acidification, ocean warming, ocean deoxygenation. So I've been very fortunate, but I'm driven by actually getting things done. Steering committees where everyone's responsible and no one's responsible drive me mad, as do massive terms of reference. We need to be doing stuff. And so with Sylvia, you know, Hope Spots is the second time round for me with Sylvia, because we're great partners in crime, if I can call it that. And the first time round was the idea that we both had of putting an ocean on Google Earth. That is now the digital ocean you see on every Google search in the world. It inspired Esri to get into the ocean mapping space. And it's enabled people to see the ocean in a digital world. And then Sylvia phoned me up and said, I've been given something called the TED Wish, and Technology, Enterprise and Design, I think it was in America. And I'm thinking of doing what I've decided to call them Hope Spots. And so I then got involved with Sylvia with that, helped create the concept, and then be careful what you wish for. It turned out that I was then chairing the Hope Spot Council with a brilliant team of people in Mission Blue to work with communities and champions around the world to recognize the importance of areas for community, and to not have this then knocked down by agencies or governments or whatever, but to give a direct link to the global community and through Sylvia to presidents of countries to get stuff done and to get the wishes of communities heard. And that's really how I ended up. It's a long answer to your short question, but that's really my sort of voyage to end up doing what I do with Sylvia.
God, that's brilliant. Some career. And you told us a bit about Mission.
I had hair when I started the career, so.
So you told us a bit about Mission Blue there. When exactly did Mission Blue start, and what are its goals?
Okay, so Sylvia got the phone call in 2009, and then she kind of schemed with a few of us to work out what her wish would be. This is where Hope Spots come from. So the TED Prize comes with a certain amount of money in America, but it also comes with a wish to change the world that many organizations then in America try and support and make happen for the individual. And so Sylvia came up with her wish, and her wish is, and I'll read it, I wish you would use all means at your disposal, films, expeditions, the web, new submarines, to create a campaign to ignite public support for a global network of marine protected areas, Hope Spots large enough to save and restore the blue heart of the planet. And of course, the genius in that is the phrase Hope Spot, because it is really about hope, it's about communities. And the other genius thing is that this is something that, in a sense, runs outside the system of countries, but is so important that gets the focus of people in countries in decision-making positions to realize that more should be done, and we should be accelerating what we need to do to protect the ocean.
God, that's brilliant. So you gave us a good description of what a hope spot is there. I know there might be some people that don't exactly know what.
Perhaps I'll tell you a bit more about that, because there is a question: what is a hope spot? And a hope spot these are areas that are special to communities that are critical to the health of the ocean. So they're not exactly marine protected areas. They're a mechanism to enable marine protected areas. And it may be that the community is really fed up with their area of coast being overlooked, or the government, as in your case, doesn't have legislation in place at the moment. We really need to make the point these places are important. So hope spots come in that sense, that they're focusing attention on new inshore areas with the will and wish of communities. So as you know, for those of you involved in taking the proposal through, to be successful, you have to demonstrate community support. So this isn't about people visiting a nice place in the world and then saying, oh, I think we should do something about it, and the community's not been involved. This is about communities and about voice and about influence and about getting things done. So there's 5 ways in which people use the mechanism of hope spots. The first, as I say, is about focusing attention on areas that are not marine protected areas at the moment, and everyone thinks they should be, and the government needs to get on with it. And we can help with the global reach we have in Mission Blue, shine a bright light on those places. It's also about existing marine protected areas where the government's got its reward of announcing it, but then haven't done anything about management. And everyone's like, you need to get on with that. So we can use the hope spot mechanism to give the empowering message from communities to governments to say, it doesn't stop with the designation, you've got to get on with it. The third way is where communities look at what the agencies and governments have done and find a fragmented mess of small places because vested interests have pushed the boundaries to be really too small. And so we see communities around the world using the hope spot process and the boundaries they put around their hope spot as a glue, if you like, to glue back together the fragments that came out of the government process into something that makes ecological sense. And then we have hope spots, and this will really come to the fore now that the agreement is there but still needs to be ratified for protection of the high seas. So we are looking to use hope spots to fast track action on the high seas and not leave it to the political process for 10 or 20 years to drag their feet. And then the fifth way is where communities are using hope spots as almost a very large area of search and saying, like the Coral Triangle with all their coral reefs, saying there aren't enough MPAs here, we need more MPAs. We're going to make this a hope spot. We now need to focus in and find the core areas. It's not enough what the governments have done so far. So it's a very empowering mechanism for communities.
Yes, it definitely is. It's a brilliant concept. I'm so delighted to get the first hope spot in Ireland.
Yay, well done.
We were also excited when it came out. So thank you for explaining that. So I have a few clips here which you kindly shared with us on one of your new projects, Saving Our Wild Isles. So do you want to tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, because this is actually going to launch tomorrow. And so we've had a rapid series of negotiations this afternoon to be able to bring you 2 exclusive clips from what everyone else will see tomorrow. So David Attenborough's new series on Wild Isles, this was made by Silverback Films in association with the BBC. And inspired by this, we are going to be launching tomorrow 4 films for business. We believe that getting business on board is critical for changing the trajectory on the decline of biodiversity. If you can convince the supermarkets to change their purchasing powers, you can convince the banks to loan money in a more sensible way to green investments, then we can change things. So they're going to be released on the Saving Our Wild Isles website tomorrow, and I think Grace will provide the links after this this webinar. And there's 4 films. The first is The Business of Nature. The second one is about Hungry for Change, which is about the whole food system and how it impacts nature. There's Banking on a Wilder Tomorrow, which is about the finance sector's impact. And then there's Catch 22, which is the marine film. That involves myself and a number of other people, including Deborah Meaden, who some of you may know from Dragon's Den in the UK, who's a great champion of removing plastic from systems and packaging. So what we've done is we've got you 2 very short clips from Catch 22. The first clip, which we'll play now, is looking at the problems that we face when trying to protect the ocean around our islands.
Yeah, I will share.
Over to you, Grace, with the technical magic here.
Yes, hopefully we get it. Play it now. Now, can everyone see this?
Yeah. Imagine you went to your favourite grassland and there was a farmer ploughing it up, and they said, well, only do it once a year or twice a year. You would be appalled by that. But that's what's been happening in the ocean.
Scallop dredging can be very damaging. So if you think about it raking the seabed, if there's anything at all sensitive growing there, they're very, very delicate. So a dredge is going to take away most of that growth, most of that biodiversity.
In the UK, nearly all our scallops are caught by dredging, and the demand is increasing.
I remember, like, years ago when I was scallop diving, we go down onto the seabed and we pick up individual scallops, put them in a net, and then they go up. And sometimes we're diving on pristine reefs in Scotland, more beautiful than I could possibly have imagined. At the end of each day, we would leave a buoy up so that we could come back the next day. And sometimes the scallop dredgers used to see us working, and then they would come in on our buoys and they'd tow perfectly legally for scallops overnight. And we would go down the next day expecting the reef still to be there, you know, the colour, the beauty, the fish, the crabs and everything else. And it would just be boulders, just smashed to smithereens. And I couldn't believe that this could be legal. You know, it was, and still is.
Not only does bottom trawling decimate life on the seafloor, it releases an estimated 47 million tonnes of the carbon locked away in the seabed each year. Combined, all our activities have caused a cascade of events, putting our social and economic resilience at risk, and have the potential to completely disrupt our entire ocean system.
We're in a race against time.
Not enough regulation, not enough control.
We are now at a pivotal point in our history.
We're the generation with the technology and the power, and we do know. And with that knowledge comes the ability to act in the right ways to make a difference. Okay, so that's the first clip, and while Grace cues up the second one, which will be about what we're doing to want to use them in your campaign. If you want to use them in your campaign, you'll be able to. They're evergreen, as it's called, which means then they won't date. And this is a unique thing happening. So this is the same company that made David Attenborough's film. So the visuals are truly amazing, and it's been powered and supported by a unique coming together of RSPB, WWF, and the National Trust. So you can expect to see a lot of stuff happening on social media tomorrow on this. And what we'll do now is we'll just play you a very short second clip, which is about the perception of and the reality of how much protection there really is and why we need to do a lot more. So if we can play the second clip, Grace, I'd be very grateful.
Yeah.
By protecting specific areas of our seas, we provide safe havens for wildlife. 38% of UK waters are designated as marine protected areas, but only a tiny proportion offers true protection, where nothing can be extracted or disturbed.
There are only 4 tiny no-take zones. They make up something like 0.002% of British waters. And so most marine protected areas, they either do very little to restrict any activities, or they do nothing at all.
No-take zones give the entire ecosystem the best chance to recover. And it's not just within their borders that we see improvements.
Most fish and shellfish have open populations, so once the eggs get fertilized, those tiny little baby fish drift around in the plankton for 3 or 4 weeks, and they spread out. And so effectively those protected areas are reseeding all the surrounding areas with baby fish and shellfish. Even though you're closing some areas off, it actually boosts your overall production in terms of seafood.
In just one of our no-take zones, around Lundy Island in the Bristol Channel, we're already seeing remarkable results. Conservationists and fishers alike have found that the lobster population has more than quadrupled in the no-take zone, with lobster growing bigger and producing more eggs, whilst catches on the edge of the zone have significantly increased.
Marine protected areas are also worth billions in terms of the benefits that they provide to surrounding fisheries. There are business opportunities in terms of supplying supermarkets with truly sustainable sources of fish.
So the best way to get marine protected areas to perform well is to get everyone who uses them on side. This might be fishermen, this might be local residents, surfers, this could be tour guides. They all have a vested interest in that area. They might start off with different views, but if you go through the right process, you can find a compromise that suits everyone as best as possible. And the great thing about that is that then they will feel some ownership of that marine protected area, and they'll also respect the rules.
These areas not only boost marine life, they protect and enlarge vital habitats, benefiting coastal communities and help in the fight against climate change.
And that's where we'll stop it. Tomorrow you can see a lot more. We'll put the link on at the end of the webinar. But I hope the imagery and the idea is helpful to your campaign. We will be taking these films to businesses throughout the UK to have discussions, both perhaps in the city as well as around the country, with all sorts of businesses in terms of how they can get involved and how they can do their bit and use their voice and their influence to rapidly accelerate what we're trying to do on our side of the water. But we thought you'd love a couple of exclusives to see what's coming next.
Yes, that was brilliant. Thank you. They're hard-hitting videos, and they're so relevant to Irish waters as well, because the bottom trawling goes on in our waters over here too, and we don't have any no-take zones, so work will definitely help over the side of the water too.
Yeah.
So you talked a bit about it in the clips there, but could you tell us a little bit more about the role of marine protected areas in conserving our oceans?
So I guess there's 2 ways you can do marine protected areas. One way is through the sort of legislation approaches that we've got in this part of the world. One way is focusing on particular elements of ecosystems that are important. And Europe has driven this very much through things like the Habitats Directive, reefs, large shallow inlets and bays, particular species. And they're really quite complicated to operate. And they do, if you get the mechanisms in place, help stem the loss of biodiversity. But we know from experience around the world that the type of marine protected area that you need is fully protected ones. And this is because the benefits increase with the level of protection. And so the highest level of benefits, not just for nature, but for business, society, communities, individual experiences with how wildlife should be in the ocean, are with fully and highly protected marine protected areas. Perhaps 20 years ago, when the pressure on the marine environment was less and we didn't realize how overtaken we were being by the impacts of climate change, the former may have served reasonably well, which is protecting particular features. What is clear now is that there is a silent storm sweeping through the ocean of climate change. And what we need places, not just for nature, but for communities, that are the places that help the ocean bounce back when the impacts occur, and they will occur, and we're seeing them occur. So we need to be thinking much more about what that balance now looks like in light of where we really are in the system. And when people say to me, how much of the ocean should we protect? And I now say everything. And what I mean by that is there's a danger, even with no take zones now, of creating islands of hope in a sea of despair. And what we actually need to do is look at the whole ocean, and we need to be stopping industrially fishing the forage fish that feed the seabirds outside marine protected areas. It's all connected. So there needs to be a mind shift in how we use the tools that we have available to meet the situation that we all now find ourselves in. And I think where we can do that around the world, communities in the future will look back and go, do you know what? The decision makers and the governments were very wise. They helped protect us all and shield us from the worst effects that we're now starting to really see across the whole ocean seascape.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. Thanks for all your expertise. Much appreciated. And when we post the webinar on YouTube, like Dan said, I'll post the link to the Saving Our Wild Lives website for anyone that wants to go find out more.
Great. And the films are free to use, and we're encouraging people to use them with businesses to have that conversation. Thanks very much. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be on this call.
Brilliant. Thank you. So our next speaker is Lucy from SeaSynergy, and she is one of the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot champions. So hi, Lucy.
Hi, how are you doing? It's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks so much, Dan and Jack, for your great talks, and super to see those films, Dan. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely check them out tomorrow. So really interesting and really engaging. So yeah, delighted to be here. Thank you.
Delighted that you were able to make it. I know you're really busy. So could you tell us a wee bit about your work at SeaSynergy and how you started it?
Sure, of course. So yeah, I'm a marine biologist. I grew up in Southwest Ireland, County Kerry, in Waterville, right on the beach. My family have a restaurant there, and the beach was pretty much my blue backyard. So I even used to bring my cat down to the beach with me, and I would get some strange looks. But yeah, I grew up there. I learned to scuba dive, as my parents were scuba divers as well. I learned to scuba dive when I was 12 off Derrynan and Deanish and Scariff Islands there. So I was really immersed in the ocean, and I suppose the ocean was part of my family, and I've had the best experience of my life with or in or under the ocean. So I've grown up with it, knowing it, and wanting then to protect it, as I feel like it's part of my family. So I went on then from Waterville, from Kerry, and I studied to be a marine biologist. I did marine biology and zoology in the University of Wales, Bangor, and then every summer I'd go back home, work in the restaurant for a couple of months, then go off and get some experience in research or education, marine research or education in amazing places like the Indian Ocean or the Seychelles or Madagascar. So yeah, and then I did a master's in marine environmental protection, and yeah, I guess that's where I found myself then. I was working in Dublin with the Blue Flag and on Tashka, managing the Blue Flag beaches. But then I wanted to be in the countryside, and I wanted to be with the community and working, raising awareness around how amazing the ocean is, and you know what stuff that I knew that lots of people really would love to know. So I said there's an opening to open a marine awareness and activity center. And so people were also asking the question, what is a marine awareness center? Because there was never ever one opened in Ireland. So it was causing a few confused faces. But yeah, so we opened an exhibition all about the ocean, really interactive, called it SeaSynergy. And then our main aim was to get people engaged with the ocean through activities, seashore safaris, and really get people to understand how important the ocean is and what our relationship is with the ocean. So it's all about seeing the synergies with people and the ocean so that they can really get to, love it as much as I love it, and then want to protect it, really. So we do lots of different activities, seashore safaris, snorkeling trips. We do kayaks, stand-up paddle boards, and we get people immersed in, on, or near the ocean. We're out in schools doing the Marine Explorers Education Program. So we work with thousands of kids in Kerry and nationwide as well, with other programs. And yeah, we bring families out on snorkeling trips, and you see the smiles on their faces when they actually realize this whole new world is actually there that they never even knew existed. Or when you see, or when you hear from people, they're like, oh, I just thought that was seaweed and rocks, and you've already shown them on one rock there's 20 different species. They're like, whoa. And we have families come back to us and they're like, thank you so much for showing us our coastline, because they now go to their own beach up the country and they have a whole new relationship with their ocean, and they're each explorers as they go out and enjoy this new relationship with the coast. So yeah, I did enter in 2014 with the intention of introducing people to the ocean and its wonders. And yeah, we've been doing it ever since. We don't have our exhibition anymore, but we have a traveling exhibition. So we travel around Ireland to festivals and to different engagements. Yeah, and just talk about what we love talking about and getting people engaged as well. So it's great.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. I love how you described that you feel like the sea is part of your family. And yeah, showing people what there is. So many people don't realize how diverse Irish seas are. They've no idea. And then it's brilliant that you're showing people what we have. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about sort of the surrounding area down where SeaSynergy is and find there?
For sure. And yeah, for sure. And even just one defining factor, I'd say, in the way my life went was an encounter with basking sharks. So thanks for showing your beautiful picture, Jack. It was really nice. So I was leaving to go do some research in the Maldives on manta rays, so some photo ID research on manta rays. And it was 2 days before I was leaving, and I was told there were sharks off my local headland. And so I headed out and I was like, whoa, these sharks are massive. So this was just after I'd done my marine biology degree. So I was a new marine biology graduate, and they were basking sharks. And so I was like, my brother is a water baby as well. So I went and got my brother and was like, we're going snorkeling, let's jump in the water. And so we saw mackerel feeding, and then next thing, this huge basking shark just came by us. It was amazing. And when we came back out of the water and up onto the top of the headland, we looked around and there was about 50 basking sharks off the headland, off Hogshead. And then we came into the bay and there must have been 20 to 50 more. So I was reporting like approximately 100 basking sharks around Hogshead. And that was the kind of moment where I was like, we're not studying these basking sharks. I hadn't heard about them before. There were 2 studies that had been done. So I said, okay, I'm coming home after the Maldives trip and the manta rays to study these basking sharks. And then that's when I started opening the Marine Awareness Center. And yeah, ever since I've had such amazing times with marine wildlife in and around the coast of Kerry, from humpback whales, minke whales, basking sharks again, the dolphins, Risso's dolphins. We get so many different types of whales and dolphins there. And it's definitely a biodiversity hotspot for feeding for humpback whales. One year, I think it was 2016 in October, there between the Skelligs and the Blaskets and Braehead and Valentia, there was approximately like 15 humpback whales feeding. We had common dolphins, and we had minke whales, and we had bluefin tuna. It was amazing, and feeding frenzy with the gannets and with all the birds, and you're just blown away. It's like everything's coming around you. And I remember at one stage the humpback whale, and like I was out with a boatman who was very well experienced, John, who does the Skellig tours from Bonavalla. So we were on a big boat, but like the humpback whale, I was on top of the cabin house, and I was looking down. The humpback whale went right under the boat, so it was mind blowing, and yeah, just really fascinating experiences. I think like I've been very lucky to go to the Galapagos as well, and my shark encounters in Ireland have been just as good as my shark encounters in the Galapagos. It's pretty amazing space that we have. And because of the situation where Southwest Kerry is, there's the continental slope drops off to 100 meters just beyond the Skelligs, and that's where there's a lot of upwelling. So there's this phytoplankton and lots of food there, lots of fish go there to feed. And then from the Skelligs, there's a gannet highway where you see these beautiful gannets going back and forth out to this feeding area, and also where the humpback whales are as well. So it's really a fascinating place. And yeah, please come and see us, because we love showing it to all of our friends. Yeah.
Yeah, God, I can see why it became a hope spot. It sounds amazing.
And that's just my local area. Like if you go up the coast again to Tralee Bay, you have the sharks, and again further up you've got the dolphins, and the basking sharks again. So and yeah, sorry, I'm getting excited. It's pretty obvious, but I haven't even touched on the macro stuff. Like we've just started research, so we do research as well, and we only 2 years ago we found the largest native oysters that have ever been recorded, and they're in a local area in Southwest Kerry as well, and they're much bigger than any other native oysters that have been recorded. So we're currently looking for funding for more research on that, because nobody ever documented them. So that's one of the big things SeaSynergy wants to do as well, is to research the areas so that we can know what is there, so that we know what we need to protect. Because obviously a lot of research has gone into fair seas, but there's certain areas that still haven't been, and like there's seagrass beds. So you're talking about blue carbon, Dan, there's seagrass beds that haven't been documented in our area. So we are bringing in interns and students to work with us to do these studies, to try and find as much baseline information before we don't know any more about it, before it gets dredged with those scallop dredges or trawls, so we want to know what's there so that we can protect it.
Well, that's amazing. I didn't know about the native oyster, the biggest native oyster. That's brilliant. So how did your work with SeaSynergy, how did that help with the greater Skellig Coast becoming a hope spot?
Yeah, so I suppose a lot of our work is community-based and engaging communities. So that would have been one of the main important factors with applying for the Mission Blue Hope Spot. So we're like the local champion that's engaging the communities and the schools and tourists or local community as well. So we do a lot of that work and raise awareness through campaigns or social media campaigns as well. So I think that was really why we were chosen to team up with Fair Seas Group, which are an amazing group. So we're delighted to work with them. Yeah.
And how do you feel like an MPA would help the area? What are your hopes for the future?
Yeah, I think, as Dan mentioned, like no-take zones are so important. And obviously there's fears around that, because people think, oh, we won't be able to do anything. But actually, if you think on the perimeter of that area, you get all this overspill and all this overflow of the animals that are actually protected. So you're going to have abundance in an area that, that wasn't so abundant, or was abundant, now isn't abundant. But if we leave it alone, nature will replenish itself, and it's proven to do that. So if we actually leave it, nature will get on with its business and look after itself. And then we can all prosper when there's these actual no-take zones. Yeah. And for us, as you know, non-invasive work, or like, you know, like bringing people on snorkeling trips, you know, to see more of the kelp forest, to see more of the life, like the ecotourism tours that you can do, it would be amazing, you know. And for the boatmen that work around the coastline, it would be fantastic as well, because if there's more food in there could be more dolphins, you know, all of that. It all, it's a like multi-trophic layer, so and a ripple effect, really. So I think it would be fantastic to see some no-take zones, and obviously consult with the local communities, because the local communities and the fishermen know best, really, because they've been there all the time. And then, yeah, to build from the knowledge, and it's traditional knowledge and wisdom that we have to tap into to help progress the future as well, you know? Yeah. So yeah, I'm very hopeful and looking forward to seeing where we land, because we have such an opportunity in this moment right now. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. You put that so well. And it's great to see the clear passion coming off you for the area as well. So thank you so much for chatting to us today about it. So before
Thank you.
Oh yes, and I'll put a link to the SeaSynergy website in the description on the YouTube channel as well. So anyone that wants to learn more about SeaSynergy, or maybe go on one of your trips, they find the link there. So yes, before we go on to our questions, Jack's going to give us a quick update on the upcoming events happening with Fair Seas. So over to you, Jack.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll just share this here. And just one interesting point actually on what you just said, Lucy, is that how, you know, you said there's still so much we don't actually know, you know, which I think is incredible. Just last week, we were doing a talk with SeaSearch. So SeaSearch is active in the UK and in Ireland. And they were just talking about how, if you look on the Irish Biodiversity Data Centre, so anyone on this call who might have heard of the Biodiversity Data Centre, it's our big central hub for where all biodiversity data lives. And if you can go on there, look for your local area or look for a species. And in some areas in Ireland, like blue swimming crab or green shore crab, like the most common species that you can find under most rocks, some areas there's just no records for them. And it's just mostly because records haven't been submitted. So what could be really interesting, if anyone wants to play their part, head on to the Biodiversity Data Centre, try to find data for different species in your local area, and then send in the records, submit the records either through SeaSearch. And it's, you know, it's just, or there's loads of different groups are collecting data, but it's just really interesting to start to see how we can fill these data gaps. And there's even somebody in Phoenix that we'll probably do some posts about the next few months, who has offered that if anyone wants, he's putting a GPS in a swimming buoy and swimming around seagrass beds in his area. And he's a GIS total whiz. And he said that anybody who wants, we'll hopefully do some more promotion about this maybe in the next few months, but he's working with SeaSearch, so check them out. But he said you can send then your GPS files to him and he'll put them on GIS and he'll map out and he'll start to build the maps of seagrass beds around Ireland. So it's super cool. It's really accessible, you know, for people to get out and play their part. So hopefully, you know, once we hear more about that, we'll let people know more about it. And just plays to your point there, Lucy, exactly, that we definitely need to do more learning as well, you know, and get out mapping and understanding our areas. So let me just see, I'll share this here. So just a couple of last points from Fair Seas. We've been out among various communities around Ireland, talking to fishermen, talking to anglers, talking to researchers, scuba divers, and loads of those videos are available on our YouTube channel if you just search Fair Seas Ireland on YouTube. And last year, we actually traveled all throughout the what is now the Greater Skellig Coast Hope Spot, all around really kind of South and West Kerry. And we talked to different people who have whose lives and whose livelihoods depend on the health of the ocean. And we made a film called Fair Seas, the Kingdom of Kerry. And the next event we have with the Irish Wildlife Trust is actually going to be an online screening of that film during Biodiversity Week. So stay tuned to the social media channels for updates on that. And I just said I'd share a small little teaser clip of what that looks like. So sorry. Here we go.
We've got absolutely extraordinary marine life. Like, they just fish and fish and fish till it's gone.
Unfortunately, like the whole world, our oceans are under serious pressure.
Yeah, there's a big decline in all species, I'd say.
Just recently here, our local beach was closed because of polluted waters.
And I mean, if you don't have healthy seas, you don't have healthy anything.
So that's just a small little teaser of a 12-minute film that explores the viewpoints of all sorts of different people whose lives have a stake in the ocean. So we have Lucy there from SeaSynergy, of course. We have Michael O'Donnell, a diver. We have some champion anglers, some local anglers. We have fishermen, eco-tour operators, and everyone giving their own viewpoint. And we actually that film actually won an award at the Nature Without Borders Film Festival just last month, which is fantastic. And we have a second film we shot in the opposite end of the country. So in the northwest coast of Ireland in January, in a snowstorm, actually, as it happened, we ended up filming our next film, again, talking to all sorts of different people whose lives revolve around the ocean. And we're just making these videos to show the community of voices that exist around Ireland, and the people who are interested and invested in our seas. So just to let you know, the next big event for Fair Seas coming up is the World Ocean Day Conference. If you want to scan this QR code, that'll just add that to your calendar or bring you to the website. It's on June 8th in Cork City Hall. And what this is a conference bringing together members of government, policymakers, global and national experts in the ocean, as well as members from our stakeholder groups like the fishing community, like the offshore wind companies. What we're trying to do is this is an integral time in Ireland for ocean conservation. Because our marine protected areas legislation is being written at the moment, we have the best chance at, I suppose, inspiring people and informing policy and decision makers into how good marine protected areas can be. But the only way to do that is to have all the voices at the table, because this top-down conservation, in my view, doesn't work. And I think we've realized that, and the hope spots are a beautiful symbol of that waiting for top-down powers to act, you have to get communities together. And when community voices come together, work together, and rise up loud enough, that's when people really at the top and policymakers take notice. And hopefully that's when we can have really meaningful designations of marine protected areas. So just to let you all know, that's happening on the 8th of June. On the 7th, we'll have a small reception in Cork City the night before. We'll also have a reception on June 8th aboard the Ellie Samuel Beckett, which is one of the Irish Navy ships, which will be docked quayside there, and they'll host a reception that evening. And we'll also have a tour of Cork Harbour on the 9th of June, so the following day after the conference. But those extra events, the spaces are booking up, so make sure if you're interested, head over to our website, fairseas.ie, for more information on that. And I want to say thanks very much to Grace for having us and for hosting this webinar, and to Dan and Lucy, and for anyone on the webinar here who'd like to follow along with the work of Fair Seas. You can tell I love my QR codes. I do. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter. So we just send one email a month, gives you an update of everything that we've been getting up to. You can sign up via this QR code, or if you head over to our Twitter, we just posted about it recently. So you'll find a link to it there. So I'll hand back over to you now, Grace. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jack. And yeah, again, in the description on the YouTube video, we'll put some links there to Fair Seas and the conference. So we're running a wee bit over time, but we've got time for a couple of questions. One here, just sort of for anybody to answer really, would be what would be your advice for a young person or anyone who wants to become a marine biologist or get into marine conservation?
Believe in your dreams. Believe in your dreams and persist. We need we need marine biologists and we need marine conservationists like never before. I think if you persist, there's lots of people in the community who will help and advise, and just keep pushing forward. And you know, it finds its own route, I think, some of these things, when you really want to do them. It may take time, but believe in yourself, believe in your dreams, and reach out to people to try and get engaged. You may at some point need to do things voluntarily. We've all done that. I've done that, but I think that's part of getting to know the community in a way.
That's a great response. Can I just add one thing to that for a young person? Like that with SeaSearch, and I'm sure with SeaSynergy, there are a lot of good volunteer opportunities with organizations around Ireland. So and a lot of these things, so sometimes volunteering in the marine research world can be exploited, and there are companies who, around the world, who will charge you a lot of money to go on a fancy holiday and not do much research. But even in Ireland, we have a lot of very meaningful organizations who are working to better their local area. And there's a lot of great ways of getting involved with them. So I'd say definitely look in your local area, and you'd be amazed at what can just even be done there.
Yeah, that's a great, Jeff. Yeah. Question there as is it possible for someone to pursue a career in marine conservation if they haven't studied biology in college? So you've kind of covered that, but sorry, Lucy, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, well, I would say definitely we need communications experts. So if you are into marine and love, communicating about the ocean and like things you can do to help, we need communications experts. That's one of the things I think there's been a gap in. Now it's getting much, much better, and we see great movies like that, and Dave Attenborough is amazing. But yeah, communications is key. So if you're a good communicator, or you've done any special social media skills to campaigns, things like that, you can definitely help out. Find your niche, like find what you love doing, and then apply that to the marine world, because like even if you're a dancer, you can be creative in the arts and dance for the sea, or if you're a painter, you can paint about the ocean and someone falls in love with your painting and it connects them to the ocean, so there's so many different ways of communicating about the ocean and helping people love it more. Yeah, and definitely like the volunteer stuff, if you don't know exactly what you want to do, go out and volunteer in a few different places so that you can get the best idea. I can see SeaSynergy when someone comes at the start of the summer and they leave at the end of the summer, they'll have done education activities, they'll have worked with older people, younger people, they'll have done research as well. So they fill up their CV pretty quick in 3 or 4 months just through doing all these different things over the summertime. So, and they get confidence in public speaking, all of that. And then they kind of figure out, oh, I like the education, I didn't like the research, or, stuff like that. So it's a good way to figure yourself out. And then of course that can change in a few years again, because life is all about changes and evolving. So, yeah.
Thanks, Lucy. We have another good question here. So with someone here that was working on the North Sea Dogger Bank MPA, which is an offshore protected area. So they're asking for advice for rallying community support around offshore areas where direct stakeholders that use the area, so fishermen or offshore energy, etc., are not in favour of any level of protection. So anyone have any advice for them?
I think it's a wide range of voices in communities, and to sort of build on what Lucy was saying, everyone has their superpower. Sylvia would say that. You've all got your superpowers, so use them for the ocean. So where you get remote places, it's the people who can visit those places and take photos. It's the scientists who studied them. It's the people who do the remote sensing. It's the people who can tell stories. Just because it's not beside the coast doesn't mean it doesn't matter. And it also doesn't mean that other people have rights to it and own it. You know, the seas is a commons, and everyone's voice is valid in those discussions. And we see this with the high seas, the debate on the high seas, and the issues of things like deep sea mining, where a group of people behind closed doors are trying to mine the deep ocean and try and get away with it. Well, society needs to pull them up and to expose that and to talk about it. And so, you know, it's not just about putting an MPA in place. It's about the conversation, and it's about opinions about communities, and having the space to have those conversations, and perhaps even creating the space as necessary. But storytelling and pictures can be a massive part of this as we move forward.
Thanks, Dan. That's great advice for them. Well, it's coming up to 8:15 now, so I won't keep this any longer. But I just want to say thank you to all our speakers this evening. It was brilliant to hear from all of you. And thank you to everyone that tuned in from home. There's a few questions there that we couldn't get through, but if you want to contact us through our emails or socials, feel free to contact Irish Wildlife Trust and we'll get the questions answered for you. And just to remind you, the recording will be up in a couple of days on YouTube, so you can watch it back. And we try to keep as many of our events in person and online, like this webinar, free, so that it's accessible for everybody. But if you're able to help us to continue doing this in any way, by considering becoming a member to support our work, then it's very much appreciated. So thank you everyone again, and good night, and we'll see you at our next webinar.
Cheers now.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.